Hey, have you ever noticed how some people during a separation or divorce can seem totally fine?
Yeah, it's like they're unfazed by the whole situation. What's up with that?
Well, I was thinking about it, and especially in the context of wives during separation. They sometimes act like everything's all right.
Right? They put on a brave face. But why do you think that is?
I think there are a few reasons. For one, they might be trying to protect themselves emotionally, like a defense mechanism.
That makes sense. Kind of like putting up a shield to cope with the pain.
Exactly. And also, they might be considering the well being of their kids. They
Yeah.
don't want the children to feel the tension or stress.
So they're holding it together for the sake of the family?
Yeah, that's part of it. Another reason could be societal expectations.
How so?
Like there's pressure to appear strong and independent.
Oh, like they're expected to keep it all together no matter what.
Right. It's like they don't want to be perceived as vulnerable. So they present themselves as doing just fine.
But do you think that's healthy in the long run?
Well, that's debatable. On one hand, it can be empowering.
Yeah.
On the other hand, bottling up emotions isn't always the best.
True, it might lead to issues later on.
Exactly. It's important to process those feelings eventually.
Right.
But everyone copes differently.
Do you think they might already have processed the separation emotionally?
That's possible. Sometimes the decision to separate isn't sudden.
Yeah.
They might have been dealing with it internally for a while.
So by the time it happens, they've already come to terms with it?
Precisely. They've had time to adjust, so outwardly they seem fine. Meanwhile, others are just starting to process it.
That could explain the difference in reactions.
Definitely. Another factor could be support systems.
Oh, yeah.
If they have friends and family to lean on, it helps.
Support makes a huge difference in tough times.
For sure. And maybe they're focusing on personal growth,
Right.
using the opportunity to rediscover themselves.
That's a positive way to look at it. Turning a difficult situation into a chance to grow.
Exactly. It's like finding the silver lining,
Yeah.
not letting the separation define them.
But do you think there's a risk of ignoring the real issues?
That's a good point. By acting fine, they might be avoiding important conversations,
Right.
which could be necessary for closure.
So it might be better to address those feelings openly?
In many cases, yes, communication can be healing, but it depends on the individual.
True, everyone handles things differently.
Absolutely. The key is finding what works for them,
Yeah.
whether that's therapy, talking to friends, or personal reflection.
Speaking of therapy, do you think it's becoming more accepted now?
I think so. There's less stigma around seeking help. People
Right.
are more open to it.
That's encouraging. It can provide valuable support during a separation.
Definitely. Professional guidance can make a big difference.
Yeah.
It helps in processing emotions effectively.
So, to sum it up, wives might act like they're fine for various reasons. Self-protection, kids, societal expectations.
Exactly. And while it might seem they're unaffected, there's often more beneath the surface. It's important
Yeah.
to be empathetic.
Couldn't agree more. Everyone's journey is unique.
Absolutely. We should respect their coping mechanisms while offering support. It's all
Right.
about understanding and compassion.
Well said. It's a complex situation with no one-size-fits-all answer.
Exactly. And hopefully discussions like this shed some light on the topic.
It's like they're unaffected. What's up with that?
Exactly. It's like you expect everyone to be distraught, but then some people act like nothing's wrong.
Right? Do you think they're just putting on a brave face? Or is there more to it?
Well, it's interesting because there are a few reasons. Sometimes it's a coping mechanism. They might be in denial or trying to protect themselves emotionally.
That makes sense. It's like a shield.
Yeah, or they might have been processing the separation long before it became official.
Right.
So by the time it happens, they've already moved through some of the grief.
So they're ahead in the emotional timeline?
Exactly. It's like when you quit a job you've been unhappy with for months.
Yeah.
By the time you hand in your notice, you're relieved, not upset.
Oh, I totally get that analogy.
Another reason could be that they're focusing on other areas of their life. Maybe they're diving into work or hobbies to distract themselves.
Kind of like keeping busy to avoid dealing with the emotions?
Exactly. It's a common tactic. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean they're not feeling anything beneath the surface.
So it's not always what it seems on the outside.
Right. And sometimes they're trying to maintain stability for the kids, if there are any. Acting fine to keep things as normal as possible.
That's a good point. Kids can really change how you handle a situation.
Absolutely. Parents often put their own feelings aside for their children.
Yeah.
It's tough but admirable.
But do you think that's healthy in the long run?
Well, that's where it can get tricky.
Right.
Suppressing emotions isn't usually sustainable.
Eventually it catches up to you, right?
Exactly. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Yeah,
Sooner
yeah.
or later, it's gonna pop up.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks. And then there's social pressure.
Oh?
Some people feel they need to appear strong and independent.
To save face, you mean?
Yes, exactly. They might worry about being judged if they show vulnerability, especially if they're the one who initiated the separation.
Right? They might feel they have to justify their decision by appearing confident.
That's it. But deep
Yeah.
down, they could be struggling just like anyone else.
So, it's important not to make assumptions based on outward appearances.
Precisely. Everyone processes grief and change differently.
Right.
What looks like indifference could be masking a lot of pain.
You know, I wonder if cultural factors play a role too.
Oh, definitely. In some cultures, showing emotion is seen as a
Yeah.
weakness, so people might suppress their feelings even more.
That's so true. It's like they're conditioned to keep a stiff upper lip.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean they're not hurting inside, it's just expressed differently.
Do you think there's a way to support someone who seems fine, but might not be?
That's a great question. I think offering a listening ear without pressure is key.
Yeah.
Let them know you're there if they need to talk.
Without forcing them to open up before they're ready.
Exactly. It's important to respect their process. Everyone heals
Right.
in their own time.
Sometimes just being present is enough.
Absolutely. And encouraging healthy outlets like therapy or support groups can be helpful too. Sometimes
Yeah.
professional guidance makes a big difference.
I agree. There's no shame in seeking help.
None at all. In fact, it's a sign of strength to acknowledge when you need support. It's like taking care of your physical health. Mental health is just as important.
You know, it's interesting how society is slowly changing its views on that.
It really is. We're becoming more
Yeah.
open about discussing mental health, which is great.
Definitely a step in the right direction.
For sure. And when it comes to separation and divorce, understanding and empathy go a long way.
Right.
Judging someone's exterior doesn't help anyone.
Couldn't agree more.
At the end of the day, everyone copes differently, and that's okay. What's important is finding healthy ways to heal.
Well said. It's a complex issue with no one-size-fits-all answer.
Exactly. And being there for each other makes all the difference. We're
Yeah.
all human after all.
So true. This has been a really enlightening conversation.
I'm glad we talked about it.
Yeah? It's like they're not hurting at all, and you're wondering if the marriage meant anything to them.
Exactly. But here's the thing, that
Yeah?
calm demeanor doesn't necessarily mean they aren't suffering.
Really? So what's actually going on then?
Well, it's all about coping mechanisms. Some people hide their emotions and act
Right.
like everything is fine even when they're struggling inside.
So you're saying her acting fine might just be her way of dealing with it?
Yeah, precisely. Think about it. During the marriage, if she didn't express her feelings openly, why would she start now?
That makes sense. But it's so hard for the person who's hurting.
Definitely. It can make you question your own worth, like maybe you
Yeah.
didn't matter to her at all.
And that can stir up all sorts of old insecurities.
Exactly. The divorce, it's like it unearths past traumas, self-doubt, things
Right.
that have been buried deep down.
It's kind of like opening Pandora's box, huh?
Yes. And to heal, you need to realize that her behavior isn't about you, but about how she copes.
But how do you not take it personally when it feels so personal?
Well, first, recognize that her coping mechanisms are different. She might be putting on a brave face,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean she's not hurting.
So it's like she's wearing a mask to hide her true feelings?
Exactly. We all have a survival self-mask that comes on when we're vulnerable.
Right.
It's like putting on armor to protect ourselves.
But why act happy if she's not actually happy?
If she chose the divorce, she might feel pressure to be happy now, to prove
Okay.
that she made the right decision.
Oh, so admitting she's unhappy would mean admitting she might have made a mistake?
Exactly. And that's a tough thing to face.
Yeah.
So she convinces herself and everyone else that everything is great.
That sounds exhausting, honestly.
It probably is. But again, it's her way of coping.
Right.
It's important not to internalize it as a reflection of your worth.
Easier said than done, but I get your point.
Also, sometimes that survival mask makes her seem like a completely different person. You might feel like you don't even recognize her anymore.
Yeah? People often say, I don't know who she is anymore.
Exactly. But that just shows her protective mechanisms are in overdrive. It doesn't
Right.
mean that the relationship didn't matter.
So understanding this can help someone focus on their own healing?
Definitely. It allows you to work on your own emotions rather
Yeah.
than fixate on her actions.
That makes sense. But what about when she's not just acting fine, but is actually being hostile?
That's another layer. Sometimes to justify their choices, people need to cast someone else as the villain. It's a way to avoid feeling guilty.
So she might be blaming you to avoid blaming herself?
Exactly. It's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Not fair, but it's what's happening.
But isn't that just an excuse for bad behavior? Shouldn't we hold people accountable?
You make a good point. While
Right.
understanding doesn't excuse harmful actions, it can help in processing your own feelings.
I get that. So it's about finding a balance between empathy and self-care.
Exactly. You can acknowledge their struggles without tolerating mistreatment. Setting
Yeah.
healthy boundaries is important.
So what steps can someone take to start healing?
Well, acknowledging and processing your own feelings is key.
Right.
Maybe seeking therapy or coaching to address underlying issues.
Like dealing with old wounds and insecurities that the divorce brought up?
Exactly. It's an opportunity to work on yourself and come out
Yeah.
stronger on the other side.
That sounds empowering, turning a difficult situation into a path for personal growth.
Absolutely. It's not easy, but it's worthwhile.
Right.
Focusing on your own healing can make a huge difference.
And I guess over time, it becomes easier not to take her actions personally.
Exactly. As you heal, you gain perspective, and her behavior affects you less and less.
Well, this has been really insightful. Exactly. It's like she's moving on effortlessly while you're struggling.
Right, and it feels like the marriage meant nothing to her.
That's a harsh feeling.
It really is. But I was reading something that shed some light on this.
Oh?
Apparently, her acting fine doesn't necessarily mean what we think it does.
So what's really going on then?
Well, it's about understanding her coping mechanisms. You know how everyone deals with pain differently?
Yeah, that's true.
So, think back to the marriage. How did she handle problems?
Right.
Did she openly share her feelings?
Maybe not. Perhaps she kept things inside.
Exactly. So it's like she's wearing a mask. Her appearing fine now is just an extension of that.
So she's hiding her true feelings?
Yes, it's her way of coping, and it doesn't reflect on you or your worth.
That makes sense, but it doesn't make it any less painful.
I hear you. But understanding that can help us process our own emotions.
True. But why does she have to act like everything's perfect?
Well, especially if she chose the divorce, she's under pressure to show that she's happy now. It's
Oh, I
like
see.
proof that she made the right decision.
So she might be forcing herself to appear happy?
Exactly. Even if deep down she's struggling. Her brain doesn't want to admit that maybe the divorce didn't fix everything.
That's interesting. So it's about saving face?
In a way, yes. It's like when you buy something expensive and you convince yourself it was worth it, even if it wasn't.
Haha, yeah, I've been there.
Right? So she's invested in this narrative that divorce equals happiness.
Right.
It's a lot to uphold.
That must be a heavy burden.
It can be. And then there's the survival self mask.
What's that exactly?
It's a persona we adopt to protect ourselves when we feel threatened or insecure. So if she's acting like a different person, that's her mask.
So she's not being her authentic self?
Precisely. And when we see that, it indicates she's not okay inside.
But why can't she just be honest about it?
Well, sometimes people aren't even aware they're wearing the mask. It's a subconscious defense mechanism.
I see. So it's not about us at all?
Exactly. Her behavior reflects her own coping strategies, not your value.
But doesn't that, kind of let her off the hook? Shouldn't she take responsibility for how she's acting?
You're right. She should. But sometimes people aren't ready to face their own issues.
Yeah.
It's easier to project onto others.
I get that. But it's frustrating when her actions affect me so deeply.
Definitely. It's important to acknowledge your feelings, but also remember that holding on to that frustration can hinder your own healing.
So you're saying I should, focus on what I can control?
Exactly. You can't control her actions, but you can control how you respond.
That's good advice.
And you know, I read about this guy, Tommy, who went through something similar. He realized that a lot of his pain wasn't just from the divorce.
Oh yeah? What did he find out?
He noticed that old feelings of low self-worth and past traumas were resurfacing. The divorce just brought them to the surface.
So dealing with those helped him heal?
Exactly. Addressing those deeper issues allowed him to move forward.
That's inspiring. Maybe I should do some introspection.
It can be really helpful. Otherwise, we might carry those wounds into future relationships.
Yeah, definitely don't want that.
No one does. So focusing on ourselves is key.
But it's hard not to fixate on her behavior, especially when it feels so personal.
I get that. But remember, her actions are more about her than you.
Yeah, I guess letting go is a process.
It is. Healing takes time, but each step counts.
So, instead of worrying about how she's acting, I should focus on my own growth?
Exactly. Invest in yourself. Do things that bring you joy and fulfillment.
Any suggestions?
Maybe pick up a hobby you love. Spend time with supportive friends. Even see a therapist or coach.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and remember, you're not alone in this. Many people go through it.
It's comforting to know others have gone through similar experiences.
Definitely. Sharing stories can be therapeutic.
Maybe I'll join a support group?
That could be really beneficial.
Yeah. This conversation has been really helpful.
I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes just talking it out makes a difference. Yeah, it can be. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack but insisting it's light as a feather.
That's a good one.
Thanks. So they might act fine to avoid opening up wounds or to keep things civil during the separation.
But doesn't that make it harder in the long run?
Sometimes, yes. Suppressing feelings can lead to bigger issues down the road.
Like what, for instance?
Well, it could lead to unexpected emotional outbursts or prolonged healing periods.
That makes sense. But why would someone choose to act fine instead of addressing their feelings?
It's often about control. By acting fine, they feel they're in control of the situation.
Right? Control in a time when everything feels uncertain.
Exactly. It's like standing in the middle of a storm and pretending you're not getting wet.
That's quite the image.
Yeah, and also society sometimes expects people to be strong during tough times.
Oh, absolutely. There's that pressure to keep it together.
And admitting vulnerability can be, well, scary.
But isn't vulnerability essential for healing?
It is. Opening up can lead to support from friends and family.
So, acting fine might actually isolate them more?
Exactly. It's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, trying to appear strong but feeling more alone.
Right. And let's not forget, they might also be trying to protect their ex-partner's feelings.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, they might think by acting fine, they're making the separation easier for both parties.
But that could backfire, couldn't it?
It could. If both people aren't honest about their feelings, it complicates things.
So what's a better approach?
Open communication. It's tough, but sharing feelings can lead to mutual understanding.
Right? Like taking off that heavy backpack together.
Exactly. It's not about laying blame, but acknowledging emotions.
But what if one person isn't ready to open up?
Then patience is key. Everyone heals at their own pace.
Yeah, that's true. Forcing it might do more harm than good.
And seeking professional help can also be beneficial.
Like counseling or therapy?
Yes, a neutral party can provide guidance through the process.
That makes a lot of sense. Sometimes an outside perspective helps.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a maze from the inside versus having a map.
Good analogy.
Thanks. Ultimately, acting fine might be a temporary fix, but addressing emotions leads to true healing.
Couldn't agree more. It's a tough journey, but worth it in the end.
Definitely. It's about embracing the process, bumps and all.
So, next time we see someone acting fine during a tough time, maybe we should check in on them.
Exactly. A simple, "How are you really doing?" can make a big difference.
Yeah. Showing that we care can open the door for them to share.
Absolutely. We're all human after all.
Right? And connection is what helps us through tough times.
Well said. It's all about support and understanding.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Glad we're on the same page.
Always. So, why do you think that happens?
Well, it's like she's wearing a mask, you know? Her
Right.
coping mechanisms might be completely different from yours.
So you're saying her acting fine doesn't mean she's not affected?
Exactly. She might be hiding her true feelings. Remember how some people just bottle things up?
Oh yeah. Kind of like when someone says they're okay, but they're really not.
Yeah, and if during the marriage she didn't express her emotions openly,
Right.
she's not likely to start now.
That makes sense. Coping styles are, well, deeply ingrained.
Exactly. And if she initiated the divorce, she might feel pressure to appear happy.
Okay.
It's like she has to prove to herself and others that she made the right choice.
So even if she's struggling, she might not admit it?
Precisely. It's a subconscious way to avoid facing any doubts. No one wants to feel they made a mistake that big.
True. But isn't that kind of unhealthy in the long run?
Well, yeah. Suppressing emotions can lead to more issues down the line.
Right.
But in the moment, it's a defense mechanism.
I get that. But couldn't she choose to communicate instead?
That's a valid point. But not
Yeah.
everyone has the tools or awareness to do that.
That's fair. It's like expecting someone to run a marathon without training.
Exactly. Emotional communication takes practice. If she never developed those skills, it's challenging.
That could explain why some people seem so cold or distant.
Yes, and it's important to realize that it's not a reflection of your worth.
Right.
It's more about how she's dealing with her own emotions.
But what if she's being outright mean or hostile?
Great question. Sometimes she might cast you as the villain to justify her actions.
Yeah.
It's a way to alleviate guilt or doubt.
So she needs a bad guy and you fit the role by default?
Exactly. It's not fair, but it's a common dynamic.
Right.
Recognizing this can help you not take it personally.
Easier said than done, though. Any tips on handling that?
Well, focusing on your own healing is key. It's important to address any underlying self-doubt or past wounds.
Like doing some soul searching to understand your own feelings?
Exactly. One of my clients realized that his feelings of inadequacy were there long before the divorce.
Oh, wow.
The divorce just brought them to the surface.
So the situation can unearth deeper issues we need to work on.
Yes, and while it's painful, it can lead to significant personal growth.
Right.
It's an opportunity to heal old wounds.
That's a positive way to look at it. Kind of like turning a setback into a comeback.
Exactly. And remember, you can't control how she copes, but you can choose how you respond.
Yeah.
Taking care of yourself is crucial.
Absolutely. Self-care and maybe even seeking professional help.
Definitely. There's no shame in reaching out for support. We all need help sometimes.
It's interesting how understanding her perspective can help ease some of the frustration.
Right. It doesn't excuse any hurtful behavior, but it provides context.
Yeah.
And that can make a big difference in your healing process.
So, summing up, it's about realizing her actions aren't about you.
Exactly. It's her coping mechanism, her survival self
Right.
at play. Focusing on your own journey is the best path forward.
That's solid advice. Thanks for sharing these insights.
My pleasure. Hopefully, it helps anyone going through this tough time. Remember,
Absolutely.
you're not alone, and healing is possible.